right, we'll go ahead and get started today with our webinar. I just want to thank everybody again for joining us live, and for any of those folks that check out this recording. Also, thank you for taking the time. The webinar today is around metrics that matter when it comes to choosing influencers, and then also understanding metrics that don't really matter. There may or may not be a hot take in here that just comes from personal experience in terms of metrics that don't matter. But the goal really is to help arm brands and agencies with being able to spot those influencers that will make a difference in terms of driving an ROI for their influencer marketing campaigns, whether that's in terms of direct sales or it's in reach and engagement and in following. It's not always purely money in, money out. Sometimes it is a branding exercise, but there are truly metrics that can impact that directly, and some that can be almost like false positives, and you want to avoid those when it comes to investing in influencer marketing. Great, so as we get started today, we have a brief agenda that we'll be going through. So we'll dive into components of effective influencer marketing campaigns. Right, these things are important because they will drive what metrics matter to you and what metrics don't matter to you. Because even some really critical metrics that we're going to highlight today may not be the most important for the campaign that you're running, depending on the offer, the relationship with this creator, the nature of the audience that you're reaching out to. So understanding what goes into effective influencer marketing campaigns is important. Then we'll dive into those 7 metrics that matter and those 4 that really don't when it comes to driving results from influencer marketing campaigns. And then at the end, we'll dive into how you really apply these to see results. So as always, I invite folks to ask questions throughout the webinar. We'll try to do a Q&A at the very end, but as we're diving through, if you're thinking of something, definitely just ask it, and I'm not afraid to go ahead and try to answer them in line a bit. If we get too many, we'll just push them off to the end because I want to make sure that we're accommodating of the time that we have here today. But feel free to reach out, ask as specific or as vague a question as you would like. Following the webinar, anybody that has registered will also receive a free resource from us, just definitions diving into these metrics, what they mean, why they're important. So definitely be on the lookout for that. And then also future webinars to come, we'll be doing webinars around influencer outreach, how to recruit, how do you build inbound influencer demand, because that's always the best when you have people clamoring to you, hey, I would love to be a partner with you. So we have a couple more webinar topics coming up for the month of March, so be on the lookout there. Great. So just a quick introduction to myself. My name is Ryan Hilliard. I'm the General Manager of North America here at HypeAuditor. I'm a marketer by training. I did influencer marketing campaigns in previous roles, invested a fair amount, looked at different tools and solutions. And so a lot of this stuff is based off of personal experience as well as the expertise of the influencer marketing experts that we have at HypeAuditor. So before we get to metrics, again, we want to have a baseline of understanding what components go into an effective influencer marketing campaign. So there are 3 real specific facets to whether or not you're going to see results from your influencer marketing efforts. 2 that you have complete control over in that decision-making process. Am I going to see results? 1 is the specific offer that you're bringing to light. And so you don't want to underestimate that. The magic influencer isn't going to offset a poor website experience, really expensive minimum shipping thresholds, a dysfunctional mobile experience, right? You have to have a really compelling offer. This is our product. This is our website experience. This is why it's easy. This is our value prop as a brand, right? Having that is really, really critical before you choose to work with influencers or if you choose to invest in paid media. So that's something that's entirely within your control. The next is the influencer's delivery. And you really have a good bit of control here because you probably find influencers that you like. Hey, I really like their content. I like how they're delivering their content. I imagine our brand as sort of an advertisement in their hands. And so it's a really, really simple thing to see. And when you're determining influencers to work with, hey, I like how they, address their audience. This seems really, really compelling. It seems very, very authentic. So that's great. And then the last one, and this is the most critical piece, and this is where this webinar comes into play, is understanding the makeup of the audience of that influencer or that creator, right? So the people who are watching and absorbing that content are your ultimate buyers, right? Those are the people that really matter to you. If I was to draw a correlation to paid advertising, it's those audience-based campaigns. It's like retargeting ads. These are the right folks that we want to reach. If you're a B2B marketer, it might be account-based marketing. I know that this is the right person. And so that's really what matters to me the most, is I'm reaching the right person. And ultimately, maybe the timing isn't always right, but this is the person I want to speak to. If you're selling men's accessories, like wallets or belts, is this influencer's audience something that would buy this product? Sure, there could be an affinity of women that would be buying as a gift, maybe for themselves. But if you know your core audience, and you should be able to do that exercise as you're analyzing your own brand, then you can find the right influencers that match there. Have a question right off the bat. A lot of times brands put a lot of to-dos and don'ts for influencers to create content. Is it advisable to do so? No, you really do want to lean into what is this influencer doing to get this engaged following, but your homework is more so on, is this the right person to be working with in general because of who is following them? Are these users or some percentage of those users relevant to me to drive the results that I'm looking for? And that's really what this webinar is about. So the first thing that you need to do is you need to know your own metrics. You need to have some sense of, what does our buyer look like? Who do we resonate the most with? It doesn't have to be just with paid social or influence marketing ads. It could be just in general. Who is our target customer? Who do we really, really see strong gravitation from? If you have run influencer marketing campaigns in the past, those are great ways to get a benchmark for performance. Looking at previous influencers you've worked with and their audience makeup can help inform you, hey, maybe I can actually reach a little bit into this type of user or this type of follower because this influencer worked really, really well and they have a lot of affinity there, right? Digging deeper into that, understanding what's happened in the past is a great way, probably an essential way to informing what you should do in the future. But if you don't have any influencer marketing campaigns running right now, the best thing you could do is really do that sort of self-assessment as a brand. Who is our target buyer and persona, right? It might be that there's a little bit of a mismatch there. Hey, we're aiming for women in their 30s that are looking for this type of apparel. Maybe our actual customers are a little bit younger, a little bit off center, but it's important to understand that as a brand when you go look for influencers, because finding a magical influencer with millions of followers that's going to do this on a performance-based level is highly unlikely, and the results aren't going to be there. It's really on you to do that homework. So one thing we're going to get out of the way really early on, and this is important for people that are just getting started with influencer marketing, or if you're trying to help more senior members of the team that say, hey, I really want to do what this other brand is doing. Look at all of this reach that they're getting. Look at all these followers that this influencer is reaching out to. Those are vanity metrics. Those are the things that you read about. Those have little impact on overall performance. Ultimately, what you want to be thinking about are performance-driven metrics that will drive an ROI for your campaign. And that could be, again, in direct sales, or it could be in reach. Those performance-driving metrics are what we're going to dive into here, is those metrics that matter. And those vanity ones are the ones that we're going to call out that really don't matter at all. They might impact how much this influencer or creator wants to charge you, but when it comes to, do I see any results from it, they have no direct impact at all. I like to remind people of this. Billboard advertising, especially for a digital marketer like me, when I was going through school, it gets a really bad rap because it's just like you're plastering a banner ad on some general website. But it really can be effective, similar to the coupons that you get at the grocery store. And the reason is there's a true understanding of who is driving on this road, where are they going? When people are selling billboards or they're selling banner ad spaces, there's a really strong understanding of who is the audience that's coming here, who's driving by it. Oh, this billboard is on its way to 5 different elementary schools. We're going to have a big percentage of parents every morning. And so we can pitch that to different brands that would have that sort of target audience and that those brands will see benefits. And so it's similar like that with influencer marketing. Now, the benefit we have here is that attribution becomes a little bit cleaner. We're able to get more visibility into, does this drive any results? Does it get even engagement? But try to think of it the same way. It's really about, is there my addressable audience that's going to see this? Not just every audience, not every eyeball that an influencer has following, but really the ones that I care about. Are there enough of them to justify this investment? What is the go-to engagement rate? We're going to talk about engagement rate in a little bit. So no spoilers just yet, but we'll talk about engagement rate in a little bit. So metrics that don't matter and metrics that do. That's what we're going to jump into now. The way that I've structured this is 4 metrics that don't matter, but 3 or 2 that you should consider instead of that one metric, right? So the first one we're going to start out with is total follower count. Total follower count, when you're thinking about finding creators, does not matter. It's going to be a driver of price. If you talk to somebody that says, I have 5 million followers, they're going to tout all of their followers when they're saying, this is why I want you to pay me $25,000 for a post in a story. But when you're thinking about it as a brand, or you're thinking about it as an agency, sure, you might get some reach metrics. Hey, did I get eyeballs? But it's not going to result in anything that you really care about, which is direct sales or engagement for your brand, because it's just a raw number. Who knows if they aggregated all of those followers 2.5 years ago and they've been completely flat now. They're still going to talk about the total, but the total doesn't really matter to you because it's missing a lot of context. Is this growth recent? Is the engagement recent? Is it authentic? Are these real people that are driving real results for other influencers that they're partnering with? So just looking at follower count and saying, I'm going to partner with somebody with millions of people, take it from my personal experience, you can still spend all of that money and get 0 back in revenue, 0 back in results. It's not a metric that you should really care about, but it will ultimately drive price. When you do see campaigns that do have huge, huge follower counts, and they seem to be working really, really well, it's not because of that raw number. It's because of the context within there. Well, their breakdown of audience is what's really working. So that leads us into the metric that really does matter, right? So what percentage of this influencer's million followers matters to you? Your target persona, the percentage of folks that are in your age and gender demographic for buying your product or for engaging with your content. How many of them are even real? What percentage of them are following thousands of other people? If an influencer has a large amount of mass followers, people that are following 1,500 to 2,000 other folks, you putting out a post with them, most of those folks are never even going to see it. Their feed is inundated with all of this other content. And so they're basically not addressable, let alone if they're bots, right? You would be thinking about real people. Who are the real people in here and who matches up with who would actually buy my product or who would actually engage with my content? That's what matters more. It's a much lower number, but it's the number that actually drives the results. And so finding tools and solutions like ours, where you're able to dive into, well, where is my addressable audience and how big is that? And then you could say, is it worth the $10,000 or $15,000 or $5,000 for this investment? Because I'm really only talking about maybe 12,000 people, not a million. It might still make a lot of sense, but you really need to peel back the onion to know what is the net result going to be. The other one that is really, really important, and I think even a little bit underrated because it's a little bit unpredictable. It's hard to know, is someone trending, right? I mean, maybe you can spot really, really significant influencers, but on that smaller micro scale, it's a little bit trickier. But growth rate over time is something that really, really matters. So if we were to put that alongside total follower count, right? Total follower count could be skewed from years ago. Oh, they used to be famous, right? But they're not really anymore. They're not on TV anymore. They're not seeing any growth anymore. It's pretty stagnant. If it's stagnant, it means that the content that they're creating isn't engaging. And if their content isn't engaging, it's not going to do anything for you as a brand. Maybe there's a chance that it gets lucky, but if you're saying their growth rate isn't there, it's because they're not creating anything engaging content-wise, I probably should invest in another place. Right? There could be strategic reasons why you'd want to do it, but what you really want to find is creators and influencers that are seeing their follower count grow 50% week over week. They might be small, but at that percentage and they're seeing that growth, it means that the content that they're creating is really resonating with their audience. And if you're able to find your target persona inside an influencer's audience that is growing significantly, you're going to have really, really authentic content come from that creator, and you're going to see results. Whether it's I want to drive more direct sales, or I just want to increase my reach and brand awareness. The other piece of it is you get that sort of compounding effect. The more that they continue to grow, new followers will look at their old posts, their old content, and you'll get this residual long tail value with your efforts. So growth rate matters, audience authenticity, the addressable percentage of followers matter, total follower count does not matter, right? It's like, how many mobile app installs do I have? It's in the millions. Well, what's my monthly active user number? That's the number that really matters. And so that's what you want to do, is you want to break down the addressable, real, engaged audience, not the big number. All right, so good question from Naomi G. How do I set influencer campaign benchmarks? Is it based on influencers' total follower count? So benchmarks, we'll talk about some of that context here when we dive into engagement rate. When you're looking at benchmarks, you really need to compare across similar sized influencers putting similar types of content out there to know, is this good or is this bad? Because really, really small influencers are going to have very, very different performance and engagement levels than really, really big ones. And they might still see similar types of results. And so the best way to do that is probably with a tool, right? Like shamelessly, we have great tools for showing you comparative results of an influencer to similar types of influencers, similar size influencers, so that you know, is this a good influencer with 25,000 followers talking about this content, or are they just kind of okay? It's hard to do all of that manually, right? It's just a lot of data. And so usually finding a tool to be able to compare influencers to see which one makes the most sense is ideal. Total follower base, again, isn't really what you want to care about. You want to care about, well, what percentage of their audience is female 25 to 45 with children? That's my target persona. And if that's a pretty good percentage of somebody that has 50,000 followers, it's probably a worthwhile investment, and maybe even more so than somebody that has 1 million. All right. I can't really tell this person's name, Sorbin, by their username, but maybe this will trigger them. Engagement rate is our next metric that doesn't matter. Engagement rate is just like aggregate follower count. It misses all context. It doesn't, you're not able to really delineate, is it real engagement? Is it authentic engagement? Is it just a bunch of likes and no comments? Are these real people, or are these pod powered engagements? Is it organic post engagement, really, really good, but their paid isn't, and you're going to have a paid post? That number, when you're working with a creator, especially if they have really high engagement, they're going to say, oh, I have a 4% engagement rate, which is the top of the market for people with 1 million followers. But that number in and of itself doesn't matter to you. You really need to understand what the authentic sponsored post engagement rate is. What is the engagement rate with my specific audience? Is it real? Because that's ultimately what's going to drive sales. Personal experience, horror story coming. I worked with an agency to find creators that had really high engagement rates, 500 to 1.5 million followers to promote a mobile app. And we partnered with them. It seemed great, good, really strong engagement rates. We put out this offer. We saw no results back in terms of actual sales. We saw lots of likes and comments. We didn't see any uplift in our own following. We didn't see any uplift in sales or click-throughs to our website. And it's because this number that we were attached to didn't really matter, because all of the engagement was related to the picture. It was related to the content itself. It had nothing to do with what we were promoting. It's because it wasn't delivered properly. And actually looking back through the account analytics, actually a lot of the audience was inauthentic as well. And so you can't obsess with just this raw number. Now, it can lead to good things as you peel back and you look at the context, but just engagement rate doesn't matter. So thinking about things that do matter, sponsored post engagement rate. So understanding when this influencer is working with different brands, how does it perform? Because if they have really high engagement organically, but really, really crummy engagement for their paid ads, I'm not going to see a whole lot of direct value here. It might be okay, right? But ultimately, you have to understand that you're putting an ad out there. It's going to feel like an ad probably to the audience. And so it's going to perform differently. And so if you can find creators whose sponsored posts are potentially really close in terms of engagement rate to their organic posts, it means that they put out authentic ads. They partner with brands that make a lot of sense. They're not coming out of nowhere. And those are good partnerships. If you ever see sponsored post engagement rate is even higher than organic post engagement rate, that's typically a red flag, because people don't love ads more than authentic content. It could be driven up artificially. And so you want to peel back and look a little bit further, use a tool like HypeAuditor to see, like, is this real engagement, or is this kind of driven for them to make more money by partnering with brands? Because that's not going to help you at the end of the day when it comes to, did we get the engagement that we want? Did we drive any sales? No, you won't. Right. So another way to look at this is what percentage of posts the influencer is putting out that are sponsored versus organic. Once a creator starts to only put out sponsored posts, generally the engagement of that audience goes down. The follower growth goes down. It's become too monetized. It's not real enough. It's not why people followed them in the first place. And so looking for that mix and understanding, am I just going to be like one of 6 ads that day, or am I going to be one of 6 ads that month? That's going to tell a very, very different story in terms of how much draw you're going to get from that audience, how attuned they're going to be to, oh, here's something that the creator is talking about that I might care about. I'm looking for recommendations. This makes a lot of sense to me. So engagement rate doesn't matter, but sponsored post engagement rate does. How do we measure authentic engagement is a question that we got in from Rashmi. A tool like HypeAuditor, right? We're able to tell if the accounts that are engaging are real or not real. So we can tell you if, hey, there's some weird clustering going on with how many likes and comments this person tends to get on all of their posts. That's not real. Comment rates and like rates are not going to be the same every time. They should not be grouped really, really close together. They should be spread, because different types of content can get different kinds of reactions. And so that's how you can tell, is this real or authentic engagement, or is it not? And like, where is this engagement coming from? Filtering out bots or filtering out mass followers from that engagement rate count is important as well, because that's what will really matter to you is, well, is the real audience engaging to this, or is it pod driven, or is it bot driven? I had hinted at this earlier, but relative engagement rate matters, right? So if a creator says, I have a 3% engagement rate, that could be fantastic, or that could be horrible, depending on the type of content that they're putting out, like the category that they're often speaking to, and how big they are. And so putting an engagement rate alongside other similar creators is the only way to tell, is this good or not? Rest assured, if you're talking with a creator that has a high engagement rate, they're going to tell you how high it is and how great it is. And it's up to you to use tools like HypeAuditor to go, well, let me peel that back a little bit. Does this matter to me? Is it real? Am I going to see results from this, or is he just talking about some aggregate number, or is she just promoting something that doesn't, factor in their sponsored posts, which are much, much worse? Is she charging more than similar sized influencers that drive even better engagement rate, right? It's all about that type of creator and that type of price point, and comparing them to figure out, if I put $1,000 here, what am I going to get back? If I put $1,000 there, is it going to be the same? Is it going to be less? What are the risks that I'm imposing here? And you can use those benchmarks also to negotiate. So if you have a tool like HypeAuditor, where you're looking at different influencers, hey, I really do want to partner with you, but your engagement rate's a little bit lower than over here. Is there anything we could do on price for posts, right? That's a great way to use a third-party tool as like, I do want to enable this relationship, but what can we do to come down a little bit? And that could be very, very effective. And ultimately it saves you in terms of investment. It increases your ROI immediately, because you spend a little bit less money, right? So you're fact checking a little bit of these creators. The other thing that I think is really, really important as a metric to think about, beyond just engagement rate, because engagement rate really isn't important unless it's relative, is what kind of content are they putting out to drive this engagement rate? Is it brand safe content? Are they putting out things that are driving a lot of engagement that's potentially really real, but it's maybe even a little controversial? Something that most brands want to stay away from. And so having the ability to see, this person puts out good, safe content that's very, very authentic, it just increases the likelihood of success from your investment. You don't have to worry about backlash from an audience if you pair yourself up with a creator that puts out something controversial. right? You don't want to bring negative attention to your brand. Those senior leaders, that CEO that's like, hey, I really want to work with influencers. The second there's that negative ire on your brand, they're going to say, why did we partner with this person? Shouldn't we have known, right? So it's really your homework to make sure that brand safety is there, that they're speaking about things that align with your values. There's low risk that you're going to run into issues later that could really be detrimental to your brand. So engagement rate doesn't matter. It really, really doesn't. But if you have peeled it back to understand relative, authentic engagement rate, sponsored ads versus organic, if you understand all of that, you can use that to find the right partners to drive results, but never just take raw engagement rate at face value and say, yeah, this is perfect. This is going to be the best influencer ever, because you can really run into problems. I have a question here around what's the best way to get a good influencer? How do you get attention from best influencers? We're not going to dive into outreach tactics very much today, but we do, like, our next webinar will be on influencer outreach and how do you get attention? How do you position offers and messages and even structure email or direct messages to get people's seeing your offer, right? Maybe the one thing I would add right now is finding good creators and getting them to engage with you. It will be dependent on, am I selling something that they seem to care about, and is my offer compelling to them? Unfortunately, if you say to a creator, I can't pay you out of pocket, but can you do something performance-based, even though you've never heard of me, you're probably not going to get a response, right? Because it's too much risk on them. So you have to think about offer. You have to think about how you're sort of waving at them in the masses of other people that are trying to get their attention. But we'll have a follow-up webinar in a couple of weeks that will actually be diving into recruitment and how you can effectively do that. So stay tuned. All right, so our next metric, this is our last metric, it doesn't matter, is the influencer demographic. So who this influencer is, their age, their gender, right? It doesn't really matter to you as the brand, right? Influencers have masked followers because of the types of content that they're putting out. Now, in some cases, maybe it's because of age and gender and whatnot, but a lot of times it's just the content. And the influencer themselves, while they might seem like a great partner, ultimately they don't want to buy your product. Sometimes they do, but most of the time they're not going to be the customer. The customer is who they are, who makes up their following, right? And so you want to make sure that there's some alignment with your brand. Maybe there's some value, right? If they live in your city, you can really lean into, hey, I've got this locally famous person. But for most people, if you're doing something national, the influencer's demographic matters very, very little. But what does matter is their audience demographic. And so this is the thing that you really, really care about. So if I was to pull out an example that resonates with anybody here that's done digital marketing, think of this like Google retargeting or any other of those retargeting tools out there. Your ads show up on any websites that probably aren't good, websites that are really, really aligned, websites that are just completely random. But you don't really care about the website. You just care about the person seeing the ad on that website. It's the same person that you're trying to reach. They are the relevant audience. And so that's really all that's going to drive the result, right? If you sold certain types of products and it seems like, hey, this particular website seems to convert really, really well, but it's only in a retargeting campaign, doing a direct partnership with that website probably won't result in any real success because it's not driven by the website. It's driven by the specific people that happen to visit your site and then visit this website. So it's all audience-based, right? So don't obsess over, I want my influencer to look like this and to be this old, to be from this place, because in a lot of cases, that really doesn't matter. It's more about the makeup of where their followers are from, because those are your ultimate buyers. Where do they live? What are their interests? What are their ages? What are their genders? Those are the things that are going to impact your results, right? If you find the perfect influencer to be a spokesperson for you, but their followers don't have the discretionary income to buy luxury mattresses, it's not going to result in anything good, right? There's going to be no success for the campaign there, even though the person looks perfect, right? But if you find an influencer that is fine, right? They're not unappealing. You don't want to have unappealing creators that are partners, but their audience is the perfect makeup for buying your luxury mattresses. You're going to see success there because those followers are going to engage with that content, right? They are the person that will ultimately buy, and so that's what matters the most. Other brand mentions also matter, right? So it's not just this audience sometimes it's also who else is this creator talking about? Now there's a relationship there, right? If somebody's talking about a similar category, my buyers also buy these things, right? There's going to be that overlap of audience, but that's a great way to figure out, is this a creator I want to partner with? Are they partnering with brands that I don't really like, that lead me to believe it's not a good fit? Or are they partnering with these adjacent brands that would be very, very complementary? People that buy this brand also buy that brand. And so this would be great. And so understanding those brands that they are mentioning is a great indicator. And if they're working with a fair number of brands, it's a great indicator that they see success, because creators that have lots of brand partnerships tend to be driving results, especially if it's multiple partnerships with the same brand. That's a good indicator that somebody's seeing a return here, because as a performance marketer on this call, I'm not going to keep on throwing money at somebody that's not driving any results. And so if you see regular partnerships, that's telling you this creator drives results. Now, is there the right audience there? Can we fit them into our budget for the audience that's addressable? That's still to be determined. That's a great way to understand, is this a good person to partner with or not? If somebody's doing no ads at all, it could be great, but they haven't worked that into their repertoire. They're not that experienced, and so they might not see the same results because they're not as experienced in driving results. A question from Naomi again, what is EMV? EMV is earned media value, so that's sort of equivalent if you were to pay for that traffic. It's similar to earned media value of like organic rankings, when you would say, like, if I was to pay for that traffic with paid search ads. So influencers' demographics don't matter themselves, but their audience matters, and other brand mentions. And so this is the metrics that we're going to go through today. Total follower count, again, doesn't matter. Engagement rate, just the number itself does not matter. Influencer demographics, it's all about the context. The similarities across all of these things are, it's really who is doing these actions. Are they real people that would be customers of mine, right? They're a good fit for what I'm trying to be doing. If they're not, right, if you can't make sense of why they are a good fit, it could be too good to be true, right? Any influencers that have just completely incredible results, and you're just looking at it like, I just don't see my audience there. Don't get sucked in. Like, you really need to make sure I see my audience there. I see the engagement with that audience there to know that this is a worthwhile investment in time. So I have a couple of questions coming in before we move to our next section from Rashmi is, don't we have a more competition with influencers who are promoting other brands as well? Sure, right? It doesn't always make a lot of sense to try to move an influencer from a competitive brand over, but if they are working with other brands, there is a little bit more competition. It's a little bit, you have to essentially fit into that slot, but you can, right? It's similar to if you ever buy television ads. If you watch any TV over the air, or if you watch it online on Hulu, there's never not an ad, right? So there's always placements available, and you can always fit into those placements. Is this about balancing, like, is it now only ads, or am I able to make this partnership work really, really well and fit into sort of a natural setting for when ads can pop up? And then from Mimi, isn't it deemed inauthentic if an influencer is representing many brands in the same space? Sure, it can be, right? I think the only caveat there is if somebody's an expert on a topic, right? Brands in a similar space might partner with that person because they want them talking about their product, right? If you follow golf influencers, sometimes they talk about all different types of brands of clubs. If you've ever tried to research mattresses online, there are websites that are solely dedicated to comparing mattresses. All of the listings on there are sponsored, but they're trusted experts. And so in those cases, people are following this creator, or they're visiting these websites because they know they're getting a bit of a comparison. They're getting all of this extra information. If it's not that setting, if it's just like one day this creator is promoting this brand, the next day they're promoting a complete competitor, I would just be a little bit shy of that, because it might not be aligned with what you want to do long term. A lot of times in contracts, you can actually say you will not promote a competitive brand for at least X amount of time. And that's not unusual. And that's a great way to prevent somebody from doing an ad for your competitor directly after you, right? So that would be a great way to work around that. So we talked about these metrics that matter, but again, I want to underline, we talked about this really at the beginning for a moment, but the most important consideration for you though, as you're thinking about, oh, now I need to look at these 7 metrics, not these 4, is there are certain ones that are going to matter more to you than others, and that's going to be dependent on your goal, right? Understanding your target for these investments, what am I trying to get out of it? If I'm trying to get direct sales, I'm going to be looking at metrics a little bit differently than if I'm looking for just brand awareness and engagement. Maybe in those cases, I really want to be thinking about more relevant followers than just relevant engagement rate, because more relevant followers, more relevant eyeballs means I'm going to get greater brand awareness. If I focus on really, really narrow and deep, this is my audience, there's lots of engagement. Sure, you might get some direct sales, but you're not going to get in front of as many relevant eyeballs, and so your brand awareness isn't going to be there. Doesn't mean it's not necessarily a good investment, but you want to be thinking about that as you're trying to narrow in on what metrics matter to you to get at that target customer and have them perform the thing that you'd like them to perform. After you understand that target customer, overlaying them using a tool like, again, shamelessly HypeAuditor. Hey, I understand my followers that are going to buy from me. How can I find that audience across hundreds of different creators? This is a great segue into our next topic, which will be around recruitment. Continuing to find new creators is really, really important if you want to scale your influencer marketing campaigns. You can't just have one forever. Usually you need to continue to amass more ambassadors for your brand to see it grow, because it tends to grow pretty linearly. As you add influencers, you get more value from that channel. And so being able to use this to find many more influencers is really, really important. And that's it. So we talked about how you have to be thinking about campaigns and structuring and thinking about your goals in order to form what metrics that you need to find, and then avoiding the pitfalls of choosing the wrong metrics, especially if they're vanity metrics that everybody talks about, because those won't translate into any real results. As I mentioned at the beginning, we'll send along a resource for everybody that registered with these metrics, with definitions around these metrics and how to apply them a little bit. And so I want to open it up to any questions that we have with the remaining time left, and then we can always let folks move on with their day. Great. So from Ankita, we had a question: how do you measure the success of collaboration with an influencer? So that's really going to be goal driven. So what is my objective with this money that I'm going to spend? Do I want direct sales, or do I want reach and engagement and more followers online? You need to make that decision, because those are two very, very distinct type of relationships you're going to have with influencers, because one is all about relevant eyeballs and one is about hitting those relevant eyeballs many times over. And so one's probably smaller creators on the direct response side, and one is larger creators on the brand awareness side. And then it's truly just measuring it against other channels. Okay. If it's a test, breaking even is a goal, right? Thinking about this as, did I get any money back? Do I have any reason to believe that I can get some sales from here? Is a great place to start. Don't treat it like you're finely tuned channels. If you've got a #1 ranking on a lot of really relevant bottom of the funnel keywords on Google, it's not going to perform that same way. It's a different type of animal. It takes different contexts. But ultimately, you have to measure that. You have to measure it against the goal that you determine at the outset. What are we trying to achieve? What would we feel is a worthwhile use of this money? Personal experience, when I worked at an agency for a while, if we were going to do a test, how much money are you willing to part with to get 0 results back, right? That's a good sort of baseline. How do I start and evaluate this? Was it worth it or not? And so if you're willing to put some money into a few creators and you're okay with nothing happening, right? But if you do begin to see some sales, okay, this was a positive experience. Now, moving forward, we can use the data that we've collected to shape the next round of creators that we're going to work with, and the type of content that we have them create, and maybe the specific product that we have them promote, and how we position that content to their audience, right? You kind of need some data there. So there's a couple of ways to get started about how you think about a successful collaboration. Ultimately, you do want it to be a sort of give and take. Super transactional relationships with creators have a much higher likelihood of either being good or bad, right? There's a big risk tolerance. If you have a good collaborative relationship with a creator, you're talking a lot, they seem vested in your success, right? They want this to be really good. They're willing to do maybe even more than one just post. They want to talk to you about it. That's usually a good indicator of like, we'll see more out of this. We'll be able to drive results. Transactional, maybe I would avoid that. All right. Oh, what is the opinion of offering discount codes to the influencer so she or he can share that with the audience? Do you really think it will have influence on the sales? I think the main reason, well, maybe there's two. There's two main reasons for giving creators a discount code. One is attribution. I just want to see what sales come through from this creator. And so the easiest way is they're going to use a discount code. If you said, can you provide, if you just leave this code, but I give you no coupon, people are like, well, I don't need to leave a code. I'm not going to leave a code at all. I'm just going to check out and be done. So attribution is really, really valuable. And if you think about this, you can always compare it to like, well, what would be my target cost per acquisition using a different paid channel that can drive how much can I afford to offer with a discount. The second one is it gives the creator some incentive to share this with their audience. Because if their audience doesn't get any value out of consuming this, they're just likely to skip over the ad. And so the creator wants to give back to their audience. And so that's the key value. If you can do something aggressive, it's a great way to see, like, do we get an actual lift? I do think if you say, I'm going to give this creator's audience a 5% discount, it's basically a 0% discount. And so you wouldn't expect much there. So I would treat it as a channel, like, how can I be pretty aggressive to see a lift here? And ideally we'd be able to measure back, hey, this code was used this many times. And obviously you can still track attribution using tools like ours that have like Shopify integrations or WooCommerce or Magento. But it's just another way to see, well, how many times was this coupon redeemed? How high engagement rate of sponsored posts is average, good, excellent? Again, it's really relative, right? I've seen accounts where they have an 8% engagement rate of organic and they have a 9% engagement rate of sponsored posts. And for their size, right, they have 40 or 50,000 followers. That engagement rate is really, really good, but that sponsored post engagement rate just seems very high. And you can dive in, like tools like ours allow you to like, well, let me look at these sponsored posts. If a sponsored post really feels like an ad and it gets really high engagement, like it's just a little bit suspect. So I would, take it with a grain of salt, that number, and go, well, if it was a third of that, what would that mean? Would that be worth the investment? Because ultimately, you might see these red flags here and there. This engagement rate's a little bit high. This is a little bit inauthentic. I don't like that they have this many mass followers, but you kind of have to live with it. It's just a matter of, is it worth the investment? Is there somebody else that you can invest in, put in the same amount of money and get better results? Or do you feel like, hey, it's $500. I really like this person, so it's fine. I'm just going to live with it. But at least I know I'm going to go in knowing 40% of our audience is unaddressable, or 30% of his audience is unaddressable. But it's fine. You just have to sort of weigh that. In our tool, again, we do let you know benchmarks, like how does this perform to the average? How does this compare to its organic? But it's just going to vary depending on the size of the influencers. So if you were to look at an influencer or a celebrity, the engagement rate number is really, really low, but you're talking about millions and millions of people. So the raw number might still be quite high. If you're talking to a micro influencer with 10,000 people, I would expect to see much higher engagement rates. And a lot of times those folks will do sponsored posts for things that they tend to be talking about anyway, right? My wife follows a lot of mom bloggers. The content is very relevant to her, and so that's why it has that high engagement rate. How is audience demographic not the same with influencer demographics? With the influencer demographic, I'm talking about the influencer themselves, right? Who is the creator? What do they do? What do they look like? How old are they? Where are they from? That has little, it can have some direct influence on their following at the start, but when you're a creator or an influencer, you've got millions of followers, you've become global. And so people can follow you from everywhere. And so if you've got this global influencer or creator, but you only sell in the United States, or you only sell in France, you don't care about any of those other countries. You just care about, well, what percentage of their audience can I even sell to, or is relevant to promote to? And so that's that distinction there. From Akashi Adventures, as an influencer, how do you recommend I move the brands towards looking at the metrics that do matter as opposed to them being focused on the ones that don't? I think assembling a picture of, hey, these are the brands that I've performed well with as a brand. I would love to see creators come to me and say, here is, what I've done that's been really, really good, right? In the hospitality industry, this tends to be pretty common, where an influencer goes to a resort and says, hey, I would love for you to let me stay at your place for free. Here are all the results that I've driven for other resorts before. And so you get kind of a report card. Now, it's always good to double check. Well, let me look, in a tool like HypeAuditor, see what's authentic, see what's real, see what other types of content that you've put out. But, finding those creators that are willing to show, here's what I've done in the past. So you as an influencer, here's what I've done in the past. Here's what's worked really, really well. This is what I'd recommend focusing on. Brands are always very welcoming of that. Now, if you're trying to negotiate a higher rate with a brand, right, that's just ultimately you have to find that ROI that makes sense. And so there's no magic there. It's just, people to people type interactions you have to manage. All right, and I think our last question, because we've gotten a lull here, you can always send more questions after the fact, but how much should I wait or trust for an influencer campaign to bring results after they haven't at the beginning? Influencer marketing is sort of like email marketing. You should see a pop the first day, and then you'll see it kind of dribble out. Unless it's YouTube. YouTube is a great channel where things might be a bit more linear, and then they can pop later. And then they can have this sort of perennial pop if this person gets more and more subscribers, or they put other videos out that pop, they'll follow and watch other videos, right? So that's one that you can't really look at it from day one. But if you get zero influx on day one, it's probably not going to get any better throughout, or it will get, really, really small improvements. But you should see a pop on day one with your target, right? So if I want to get more followers, this person puts out a post or a story or whatnot, I don't get any followers that day, it's probably not going to drive many followers in general. So that's the way that I would look at it. We had one more question sneak in before the end here. How do we measure the organic reach and engagement in collaborator posts? So like a tool like ours, right, we're able to pull from publicly available data, what is the engagement of this post? And then we apply the makeup of this influencer's audience to it. And so that's the best way to look at it individually, and then also look at it recently, right? You really care about what has been the engagement rate of posts in the past 90 days, 60 days, 30 days, not all time. Again, it has to be something more recency, with some recency in mind. And so that would be how we would measure it. I hope that answered that question. Thank you for all of the questions today. Again, thank you everybody for joining. Be on the lookout for a follow-up email from Nick from our team with a resource for attending today. Feel free to reach out with any questions that you have at info@hypeauditor.com or hilliard@hypeauditor.com. I'll put my email in the chat. Happy to continue the conversation. Be on the lookout for more content to come. Again, we'll be diving into influencer outreach. How can you build up a bench of influencers that are quality? You keep them. How do you get a hold of them in the first place? And so that will be coming in a couple of weeks. And then we'll also be talking about how do you build an inbound engine for creators, because there's nothing like coming in and seeing, oh, I've got 500 requests for people to want to promote my product, and they're all great quality. This is awesome. Maybe 500 is a bit much for that, but stay tuned for that. We'll continue to put this content out, and I appreciate everybody for joining me today. Have a great rest of your afternoons, evenings, or mornings.